Next.js 14, Drizzle ORM, and with some Turso sprinkled in there. By the end of this video, I'll show you how you can mix all of those together to make a very weird blog application. We'll walk through the code base, which is available on my GitHub, set up Drizzle ORM, and then connect it all together in Next.js using server actions. So let's get started. So the first thing you're going to want to do is go to my GitHub, and then there's the repo called Next.js Drizzle. If you go in here, you'll notice that there's two branches, and the reason for that is that the base is the repo that you want to start with and follow along for the tutorial, but the main branch is the actual finished product. I figured if, let's say, you follow along the tutorial using the base, if you run into any issues, you can just look at the main branch and then see what's wrong if maybe you missed something. But for this tutorial, I'm going to start with the base, and the first thing we're going to do is just install the dependencies. And here we are in the base project. I'll walk you guys quickly through it. So we have the basic Next.js application. I'm using bun for my package manager. That's why there's a bun.lock file. The source folder is pretty straightforward. So we have the actions, and that's where we create the new posts. In the app folder, we have the base page where we're going to create the new post. So we have the input form, and this submits to the backend. For the post itself, we have a page displaying all of the posts, and then we have a page for each individual post. You'll notice that it's complaining about a lot of things. We'll fix those as we go along. And then I also have some comments. Those are both for me to remember everything I have to do, but also for you in case you forget to do something. For the components, some pretty basic components here. So I have a footer, a header, a new post form, the list of posts, and then a simple title component. I was just getting too lazy to type h1 tags with the styling that I wanted. So yeah, let's just get started. The first thing we want to do is just install all the dependencies just by doing a bun install, and then we can install the actual packages that we're going to need for this. So we're going to do bun add. We're going to need the libsql client, so libsql/client. We're also going to need Drizzle ORM, obviously, so Drizzle ORM. And then for validation, I'm going to use Zod and Drizzle Zod, so we're going to also need those, Zod, Drizzle, Zod. So we're going to install those. Once those are installed, one more thing we need is do a bun add as a dev dependency Drizzle kit. This is in case you want to peek at your database and do other things. So we're just going to install this. Now, since we are using Turso, you're going to need the Turso CLI and to be logged in. So I'm not going to do this since I already have it, but all you have to do is just do a brew install Turso database /tap/Turso, and then just do a Turso auth signup. But now with everything installed, I'll go to my package.json, and there's a few scripts that I want to add in here just to make our life a lot easier. So db local, what this does, it uses the Turso CLI to create a local database for us. db generate, this generates the migration. db migrate, this applies the migrations to the database, and db studio, this is what UI that Drizzle kit comes with. It just basically lets you look at the database and do things with it. The other thing that we're going to need in here is a .env file, so I'll just quickly create it, and also make sure to add this to your gitignore. So in here, I'll just do .env. The .env file takes one value, and that's the Turso connection URL. In production, it also takes a Turso auth token, but since we're not deploying this, all we need is just the connection URL, but I'll leave this blank for now. We'll come back to it. Now, moving on to the more fun part, it's finally time we set up Drizzle, and I've done many videos on this in the past, but usually the first thing you start with is the Drizzle config, so let's first create that. We'll just need a new file called drizzle.config.ts, and in here, you'll want to export, default, an object, and this object has to satisfy, so we'll do satisfies config, and I'm not seeing it here, but I'll just import it at the top, so we'll just do import type config, and this comes from the Drizzle kit. Now we'll get some autocomplete in here, and the first thing we want to do is dialect, and this is going to be SQLite. For the schema, we don't have one yet, but we'll just do schema, and this is going to be in ./source/db/schema.ts. Next is where we want our migrations folder to be, so we'll just do out, and this is going to be in .source/db/migrations. The driver, since we're using Turso, is going to be Turso, so Turso. And lastly, you want to pass in your DB credentials, so we'll do DB credentials, and for the URL, we'll have the process.env.turso connection URL. And we'll also basically tell it that this exists. And for when you deploy this to production, you also want to pass in the auth token, so we'll do auth token, and this is also coming from process.env, and it's called Turso auth token, so pretty self-explanatory, but that's it for the Drizzle config. That's all we need in here. Now we can actually start focusing on the DB folder itself, so we'll just create that. And the first thing you want is actually the index.ts file. What this does, it basically just creates the Drizzle client for us, and we export it so that we can use it in different files. So what you want to do is just const client is equal to create client, and make sure you import this from the libsql client that we installed earlier. Now in here, pretty much the same thing. You want to pass in the URL, which is just going to be process.env. Same thing, same with the auth token. And then for exporting, you want to do export const db, and this is where you call Drizzle. And the one that you want to use is this one, Drizzle ORM libsql. So import that. Pass in the client, and then you can also pass your schema in here, and this is for your type safety and all of that. We don't have the schema yet, so we'll work on that. I'll just put it in here for now. Actually, since I know where this is going to come from, I'll just do it at the top, and so we'll just do import everything as schema from the schema file, which is going to be in the same folder. Now we'll need the migration script. This script basically is just going to go through all of our migrations and apply it to the database. So I'll just call this migrate.ts. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. It basically just uses the migrator from Drizzle ORM to go through your migrations folder and apply all of them. Now to get rid of the error, we can finally create the schema file. So schema.ts. And like I said, this is a blog application. And what do you need for a blog application? You need posts, and we'll just have one table for the posts. We're not going to have users, any accounts, but if you're interested in that, let me know and I can make a video on it. So to get started, we just do an export const posts. This is going to be an SQLite table, and make sure you import this from SQLite core from Drizzle ORM. We want to name this table as post. Some people prefer calling it posts. I don't really like using the plural, but that's just up to you. It's personal preference. And in here, my post is going to have an ID. This is going to be an integer. This is also coming from Drizzle ORM, and make sure you import this from SQLite core as well. So it's going to be an integer. I'm going to call this ID. For the mode, I want to be a bit specific, so I'll just make sure that this is a number. And then we also want to make sure that this is a primary key. And since this is a number primary key, we also want to auto increment it. So I'll just do auto increment true. Next, for the blog post, we want a title. So I'll just do title. And this is a text, also from SQLite core. So we'll have title. And I like being very specific with my columns and my tables. So for this one, I'll make sure that the length is not more than 256 characters and that we don't have any posts that don't have a title. Same thing for the content. It's basically just title but content, and I honestly had no idea what to set the length for this one to, so I just set it to 1,000. Honestly, you can leave this blank, but I'll leave that up to you guys. And I also like my tables to have a created at, so I'll just do created at is equal to a text created at, not null, but the one difference here is that we want to set a default for it, so I'll just do default, and the default here is using SQL. Import this from Drizzle ORM, and this is so we can use the current timestamp, so I'll do current timestamp. And we do this so that we have access to the current timestamp, so whenever we create a new record in this table, it already gets applied that timestamp as the default. So yeah, that's basically it for the schema. If we go back to the index file, this should stop complaining. I'll maybe just make one small change to it. And there we go, that stopped complaining, so that's perfect. Now, when it comes to validation on this table, whenever we want to insert a record, I'm going to want to have a schema that automatically goes through all the fields and validates them using Zod. So for that, I'll just create a new folder in here called lib. In here, what you want to do is have a types.ts file. And I'm just going to copy and paste this in here. It's pretty long, but basically what it does is it creates a post schema, and that's using the posts table that we just created from the schema file, so that for the title, it makes sure that it's a string and that the minimum length of it is 3 and that the max is 100. Actually, I must have played with these values because they look a little different, but now I changed them. So the title has a maximum value of 256 and the content, same thing. It's a string, minimum 1 character and maximum 1,000. I also have an emit here. This is so there's no validation for the ID or the created at. These are all going to get generated once you actually insert the record in the database. So from a user perspective or like the payload perspective, whenever they send the payload, we only care about the title and the content to be validated. The rest is just up to the backend. Now that we have all of this in place set up for Drizzle, we can just finally create the local database, apply our migrations, and wrap up with the .env file. So all you have to do here is just do a run db local. This is going to create that local database for us, and this is where we get this URL from. What you want to do with this is you want to put it in your .env as your connection URL, and that's all you have to do to make sure that Drizzle is now connecting to that local file. And you'll notice that the local database is being created down here. Also, just to make sure, I'm going to include this, so local db.star and my .ignore to make sure I don't accidentally commit this. But yeah, basically to boot up your database, all you have to do is just run db local and make sure this is always running whenever you want to interact with your application. Next, in a different terminal, what I want to do is generate my migrations. So I'll do bun run db generate. So this is going to go through, see all the changes and generate those migrations. And now we have the migrations folder in here. And if we take a look at it, it's basically what we set up in our schema file. So we have our post table with the ID, title, content, and created at. Now, the last thing we want to do is just apply those migrations. And all we have to do is just do a bun run db migrate. Once you run this, all those migrations are going to get applied to that local database. And I'm pretty sure we can even test this. So we can just do a bun run db studio, and it should be accessible via this URL. So if we go to it, it'll open in your browser, and we have our migrations folder. This is just for Drizzle to keep track of migrations, and the table that we just created, the post table, is in here. So everything worked as expected. Now, since we no longer need the studio, I'll just close this down, and we can start now hooking up Drizzle to our Next.js application. So I'll close down my terminal. The first component that I want to start with is the component that lists out all of our posts. The reason for that is it's a pretty simple component. It's a server component, and that's why we're going to be able to actually use Drizzle here. Obviously, always make sure you access your database from server components, not directly from client components. But in here, as the comments say, we first want to fetch all of our posts from the database. So for that, I'll just do a const blog posts is equal to await, and we'll have to import db, and then we can do a dot select dot from the posts table, and you also want to import that from the schema file. Now, if there's no blog posts in our list, we'll just display a simple message that there's no blog posts. But if we did find some blog posts in there, then as the comment says, we just want to loop over all the posts and render a list item for each post. So there's that. We also want to import the link component from next link. Also, make sure your function is async. But yeah, basically we're just looping over those posts, and for each, we're going to display the created at and then the title. And obviously you also want to have a link to those. So we'll just do /post/ID. If you look at this, it's going to match what we have in the app folder. So app posts, and then the ID is going to have that page for that single post. Now for creating a post, this is a bit different. This is going to be a client component since we're going to want to use a form. And this form is going to call our handler function. And what we do in this function is we want to first validate that form that was submitted. If that validation failed, we want to just show some error messages. In case you're wondering why you want to do all of this with the validation on the front end when basically we're going to be doing the same exact thing on the back end, this is pretty much purely from a user experience point of view. You don't want to spend a bunch of time filling out a form, and then when you go to submit it, if there's any errors, it basically just clears out the form for you, or it just redirects you to a different page just to show you an error message. So here we're able to keep the user input while also showing error messages. In order to validate the form data, this is where that post schema that we created is going to come into play. So we're going to do const validation is equal to the post schema, and we import this from type. You want to use the safe parse and then pass in that new post. This new post is basically just grabbing the form data that we care about. Now, if anything failed in this validation, what we want to do is grab those errors, and in my case, to keep it simple, I'm just going to console error them. If you want, as a challenge, you can take this and make sure that you display for each error on the actual inputs the message that's appropriate, but for this video I'm just going to use console errors. We also want to return, we don't want to proceed any further with like actually sending this to the backend, but for the result we're going to call create post, and this is the server action. We'll get to that in a second. If the server returned any errors, I'm just going to console error them. You can do the same thing here where you grab those errors and you just show them on the inputs, and then at the end I set up a ref for the form itself, and I'm just going to reset it. I don't have any loaders on this form, so whenever you submit, that's kind of like a good indication for the user that your form was submitted, that everything just kind of reset. And yeah, that's basically it for creating a post. And if you go to the actual page, so the main page of the application, you'll see that we have the new post component in here. This is so you can create your posts. In the actual layout, we have the header, the footer. So everything is set up already in this base repo for you. For the page displaying all the posts as well, so in here we have a suspense with the posts list, and the posts list in here is that component that we set up for fetching all the blog posts. Now for viewing each individual blog post on their own page, what we want to do is fetch each post by the ID, and we're going to grab that ID from the URL. And to do that, we'll have a const results, and also make sure that your function is async. So for the results, we're going to want to await db, also import db, and we'll do a select again from the posts table, but this time we're going to do a where. For comparisons in Drizzle ORM, they have different utilities, so we're going to want to import eq, and for this we're going to do posts.id and compare that to the ID from the URL, and we also want to parse int that just to make sure that it's a number and not a string. And yeah, that's basically all you want to do just to get one post. If no post was found, then what we want to do is just call not found, and this is coming from next navigation. So by calling this, we're just going to redirect the user to this page right here. It's just a simple post not found page, nothing complicated here. I didn't want to spend too much time on it, but if we make it past this block, that means that we do have a post that we found and we want to display it. The one odd thing that you might find with Drizzle ORM, but it's actually just replicating the way SQL works, is that whenever you do a select, it always returns an array no matter if you got one result or you got many. So we'll want to grab our post from the results array. For the text, we'll just want to do post.title here for the title, and for the actual content, we'll just do a post.content. The last piece of the puzzle here is the action that actually creates the post for us. So I'll go to the post action, and this kind of mimics what we did on the front end. So we'll want to use the post schema, safe parse the new post, and then see if it's successful. So I'll just import the post schema, and then the last thing you want to do is just insert that record. And to do that with Drizzle, all you want to do is just await db.insert into the posts table. Also want to import the posts table and then values. And for values, I'll just do result.data. It looks like I forgot to import db, so I'll just do that. And now that should just import the record into the database, and make sure to revalidate the path at the end just to make sure all your data gets refreshed. But yeah, that's basically it for the application. We can finally try this out. So with the database still running, make sure you just do a bun run dev. This is going to start up the application, and if I did all of this correctly, it should just work hopefully. So we can just start blogging. For the post title, I'll just do subscribe to CodeBrew, and for the content, I'll just do like the video, and we can just send this to the back end. You'll notice that the form got cleared, and then when we go to the posts, the post is right here. So going into the post, you'll see that we have the title and then the content that we submitted. We can go back, create another post, so more content, let me know what you want to see next, and then we send this and the post should just show up, and there we go, more content. The formatting here is a little funky, but you get the idea. But yeah, that's basically Drizzle ORM with Next.js and Turso. If you liked it, like the video, and if you want to see more of this content, just make sure to subscribe. And yeah,